Hi, welcome to episode 428 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. Today is Monday, June 19th, which is Juneteenth, a federal holiday here in the United States, recognizing the day in 1865 that all of the slaves in America were considered free. So it is a somber holiday, and a holiday in which many people have off work. I don't happen to have off work today. I am working, but that is where we are in the US. I hope that you are doing well. I had a good, I won't say long weekend because it was not a long weekend for me, although my husband left last Thursday, so I was alone for the last 4 or 5 days. He got back this morning. And so I did lots and lots of crafting, and I've brought some things to show you, and also a new craft that I have been working on. So today I am drinking some lovely tea that my husband brought back. He went to Iowa this weekend to bike ride with friends. And on the way home, they stopped at one of the Amish stores to pick up some treats. And I believe it was the gentleman that he was with that wanted to stop and pick up treats. But my husband brought me some cheese curds, which are delicious, and some peach jam, which I haven't tried yet. But peach is one of my favorite flavors of jam and one of my favorite fruits. So I'm very excited. And then the other thing he brought to me was some tea. And it is called Back Porch Blend Tea. And it is black tea with orange peel, strawberry, blackberry leaves, and flavor. And I brewed up a cup and it smells delicious, deliciously fruity. So this is what he gave me. I don't know if it says it's the Amish Country Store in Lamont, Iowa. So that is where he drove through and brought a few things home, which was really, really nice. So I am drinking that today in my friend of the pod mug, and it will be a good pick-me-up. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I am coming to you just outside of Kansas City. It's actually super toasty out today, but it's a little chilled inside because of the air conditioner, so I have my sweater on. Ooh, that is really good. It's nice and a little bit fruity. I bet it would make an excellent iced tea as well. So let's get right in. We're going to talk about knitting, spinning, and then I have a little bit of sewing to share with you. And the sewing, I actually worked on the last 4 days quite a bit, so that's why I have a little bit less knitting to show you. So I basically have 2 projects in progress. One of them I showed you last week, and one of them I said I was going to be starting, and I did start. So the first project that I am still working away on, I haven't done a ton of progress, but I am knitting a weekender, which is a pattern by Andrea Mowry, and who is Drea Renee Knits, and it is a sweater knit in worsted or Aran weight yarn. She wrote the pattern for Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, which is kind of a heavy worsted weight, and it is a very relaxed fit pullover, knit in reverse stockinette with a few details on it that are kind of fun. And so I decided, my knitting group kind of decided spur of the moment that a bunch of them wanted to knit a weekender, and so we all kind of joined in to knit. So I am using my handspun. And this is handspun that I spun last summer. It was actually yarn that I was going to use to make my own chicken. I knit chickens with the City Girl Farm, and one of the things that I get to do is every so often, once a year-ish, although this will be my first one, I get to make myself a chicken, if I would like. And so I spun this yarn and then decided that it wasn't quite right for a chicken because it wasn't quite thick enough. I wanted something that was a little bit thicker. So I've been working with that, using kind of a thick and thin, a single. And so I had about, I want to say about 1,100 yards. No, I had between 900 and 1,000 yards of this gorgeous handspun. This was a patchwork kit from Hello Yarn and one other braid. And so it is oranges and reds and kind of purples and mauves, and then it's also got a little bit of blue and some real dark colors and a few light colors. It's got a little bit of gold in there. It's just got lots of fun colors, and it's not actually like any sweater that I have knit for myself. So I have been working on the sweater, and actually let me turn it the correct side out. You actually knit the sweater inside out because you're knitting it in reverse stockinette, and so she has you knit it as though you were knitting a stockinette top. So instead of purling every round, you're knitting every round. knitting every round. So this is what I have so far, and let me find which one is the front and which one is the back. Okay, so I have probably about 6 or 7 inches now, so I've made some good progress. So this is where I'm at. The pullover has a split hem, so you've got a front and a back hem. I can't remember, what am I, well, I guess maybe that is the, I don't know. I can't remember which one I said is the front and which one I said is the back. They're pretty close to the same. There's only a little bit of difference. Anyway, and then what you're doing is you're knitting in reverse stockinette, and then you have this one detail, this one slipped stitch that kind of goes up the front. And it's a little hard to see because the hand spun does kind of obscure it just a little bit, but I think it will be nice. And I just need to knit the body basically to the underarms. So I have a bit of a ways to go, but I really, really love how this is knitting up, and it's just got some gorgeous colors. It's got like raspberries and cherries. It's got a little of that pale blue that Adrienne likes, a little bit of yellow and green, like a swampy kind of yellow ochre, and just all kinds of stuff. And then there's like little bits of purple, and I love the way this is knitting up. This is definitely a just one more row because I never know what's coming up in the next row. I spun this as a 2-ply. I probably spun it a little bit fractally, but to be honest, I don't entirely remember. And so I am just knitting this and having a good time. And just, you know, getting to it when I can. I work on it at least at knit night, which is twice a week, and a little bit of the other time. I worked on it a little bit elsewhere. If this takes me a little over a month or 2 months, that's fine. I'm not pressing for a particular time. I am a little concerned that I may not have enough yarn to do the whole thing, and so I have a few backup plans. I could try and spin something else that would kind of match this. I might have some other things in my stash. I could just do shorter sleeves depending on how much I have left. Sort of when I finish with the body, I'll probably divide whatever I have left in half and see what happens there and if I have enough to finish the sleeves. Or I could spin something completely different and just do kind of a contrast sleeve. I have a few solid colors that I think I could probably spin up that might make interesting solid sleeves to this. So we'll just have to see. I don't usually dive in knowing that I'm short. I want to say the pattern calls for about 1,100 yards in my size, and I want to say I have between 900 and 1,000. I probably will not knit the body quite as long as the pattern suggests, and again, we'll just have to see, but I am loving the way that's coming out, and it is making me very, very happy. And I just started this big skein. I got most of the way through on the previous skein, so there still is a lot of this left. This is an 8-ounce skein, and then I have another one, so I'm really excited. So one of the other things I did this weekend is I went out and got a manicure. I love getting manicures. It's just kind of a guilty pleasure. And Wes was gone, and so I went and got a manicure and pedicure, and it was fabulous. It was so great. I went early, well, not early. I went as soon as they opened on Saturday morning. And there was no one there yet, and so they had one person do my toes and one person do my hands, and I was done in 45 minutes. It was so great. And they had those big massage chairs. Anyway, that was kind of a fun thing that I did this weekend. So the second project that I'm working on is I am working on a pair of 2 at a time toe-up socks. And my goal was to kind of get through the heel this week, and I'm not quite there. I am working on the heel flap. So I'm going to call it a win anyway. And so what I am doing is I am using a sock blank from Zen Yarn Garden. This is probably, I don't have a tag for this, but this is most likely their super fine superwash merino, which is 400 yards per skein. This was dyed in a sock blank. So I've talked about that before. A sock blank is usually where the yarn is loosely machine knit up into something that resembles kind of a loose knit scarf, and then dye is painted on, and then when you pull the yarn, in this case it was a double stranded sock blank, so there were 2 strands in knit up, and so now it creates 2 identical strands of yarn through the entire gradient. So what I am doing is I am knitting a pair of socks 2 at a time so that I can make use of the 2 strands of the gradient that are exactly the same, and theoretically I should get exactly the same socks. So that's kind of a neat way to get identical gradient socks. So the pattern that I am using is I can't remember precisely what it is called. It will be linked in the show notes, and it is a pattern from Knit Picks from their website, so it does not go to Ravelry. It is basically a 2 at a time toe up sock. So the reason that I decided, well, so obviously I wanted to do 2 at a time because there are 2 strands here, and unless you unwind them, they're all wound into this cake. So it means it's much easier to knit socks 2 at a time. And the reason I decided to do toe up socks is because I want to be able to use all the gradient. And so I decided I would start at the toe and work my way up, and then I can just knit the legs until I run out of yarn, and I can just do some calf increases, some increase in the calves of the legs if I think that they're going to be too long and not wide enough, and that way I can get the whole gradient skein in there. You do not necessarily have to knit the whole skein, but I like to give myself sort of maximum versatility, and this is a technique that I often use, not the 2 strands, but this is a technique that I often use when I have my own hand spun, because I don't like to waste my hand spun. And so if I start at the toe and work up, I can use up every last inch, versus if I start at the top and work down, I have to guess and hope that I have left enough for the foot. So what I wanted to show you is that I'm knitting these socks 2 at a time on magic loop, and I'm actually in a weird phase where I'm knitting back and forth because I am doing the so it is what I would call the heel flap, but it is actually on the bottom of the foot. So the thing I will say about this pattern is it is more of a recipe than it is a precise pattern. So the pattern gives you no gauge and no stitch counts. Basically what it tells you is that it instructs you, I lied. It gives you a stitch count to cast on. And so basically the socks start at the toe, and this is what I have so far, and I'll talk through this. You start at the toe with Judy's Magic Cast On, and it tells you exactly how many stitches to cast on, and then it tells you how to make your increases. So like exactly where you make your increase, and then it tells you just keep knitting in this manner until the toes are such that they fit over your toes. So you can try them on your feet as you go, and so I ended up at 60 stitches. I'm getting about 7 to 7.5 stitches an inch, and I am aiming to knit a medium-sized sock, which fits approximately a 7 to 9, a size 7 to 9 foot. If I were knitting these for myself, I probably would have stuck to 56 stitches. I have a size 6 foot, and that is generally my stitch count. If you normally knit socks, or if you have knit socks before and you generally know what your sock gauge is and approximately how many stitches you use, you can sort of use that as a guide. So I knew that I was going to be doing probably 60 or 64, and these are wide enough and have enough stretch that with negative ease, I thought 60 would probably be fine. The pattern does include some suggestions on how long the foot should be based on what size sock you are knitting. If it is for you, it suggests that you knit the toe until the toe just covers your toes, and then you continue straight knitting until you hit a certain point on your ankle, or you knit just the part where your foot kind of goes to increase for your ankle, and that's where you start the flap. And there is a diagram, and so if you are knitting these socks for yourself, you can just try the socks on your feet, and then you will know exactly where you are supposed to be. And then if you are knitting them for other people, it tells you approximately, oh no, I pulled my needle out. I didn't even realize I did that. It tells you approximately where to knit to. I don't think this is going to be a huge problem, but it's not that much fun either. So, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I will pick them up when I get back. So basically it tells you, it shows you to, it has a little diagram where you try the sock on your foot, and it shows you where you should stop knitting and start knitting your heel flap. And in the pattern, it tells you approximately how long your foot should be depending on what size you are knitting, and then you can sort of back into it because it tells you how long to knit the heel flap for and how long the heel turn is going to be. So basically then it has me start to knit a heel flap on the bottom, and this is just a slip stitch heel flap, so it's a slip one knit one, and I am working back and forth to create this heel flap. So I'm only knitting on one side of the needles. So I knit across one sock, and then I knit across the next sock, and then I purl back on that sock and purl back on this sock. So instead of going round and round and round like I am normally with the 2 at a time on magic loop, for the heel section only you'll be working back and forth, but you don't need to take them off the needles. You can still just work them in the order. And the nice thing about, well, so there are there are positives and negatives to every, you know what? Okay, now I'm going to start to put these back on while I talk to you about this. So there are positives and negatives to sort of any method that you can use to knit socks, and it's just a question of your preferences. So I actually these days knit my socks generally. I knit my socks on on DPNs, and I knit them one at a time. And I have found that knitting socks two at a time takes a little bit more, particularly on Magic Loop. I spend a lot of time moving the needles around and trying to figure out, you know, where my needles should be, where my yarn should be, making sure that it doesn't get tangled. And that is a feature of this project. Now, on the other hand, when I knit socks on DPNs, I have to do two things. One is I have to go knit the second sock. So as soon as I finish the first sock, I got to cast on the second sock and make sure that I don't leave it, you know, they talk about second sock syndrome. If you do not finish your if you do not finish the second sock, you know, compared to the first sock. So that is one issue. The second issue is that you have to remember exactly how you knit the first sock so you can make a second sock to match. Now, often what I do is I just count the rows that I have done. So I'll count how many rows I did on the foot, or I'll count how many rows I did on the cuff, or whatnot. And then I try and knit a sock that matches. And I would say probably 50% of the time I'm successful, and 50% of the time I would bet I'm not exactly successful because I get close, but not quite. And at least 25% of the time, I find that one sock is a little bit longer or shorter than the other one. So, benefits of knitting both socks at the same time. They do take longer, and you do spend more time making sure that your yarn is not tangled. However, when you're done, you're done. And the other thing is that because you are knitting each row at a time, and because you basically have to knit a full row to have your yarn back where you need it, it's pretty hard to make two different socks. So you end up with socks that absolutely identically match, because you knit across one and then you knit across the other, and you purl across one and you purl across the other. So there are definite benefits to both, and particularly for this application where if you want gradient socks and they come in a blank like this, the best thing to do would be to knit them two at a time. Now you could pull these apart and you could wind them into separate cakes, and then you could knit them separately, or you still could knit them two at a time. But I have just left this in the gradient cake, and I'm just working off the gradient cake as I go. So I have a little bit more to do on my heel flap here, which, like I said, I'm doing back and forth, and then I will do a heel turn, and then there will be some form of gusset picking up. Now, like I said, I have never done the heel flap so that this is going to be on the bottom of the foot, because it is still part of the bottom of the foot length, and I've never done it that way, but I do know that there are very successful patterns that do it that way. So if you are interested in this, this is a long way of sort of narrating my way through these socks. I am knitting these socks as a sample, and there will likely be a class coming up in the next couple months on how to knit two socks at a time on Magic Loop toe up using a gradient. So that is what we're doing. If you want to check out the pattern yourself, it is a free pattern. Like I said, it's very much a recipe. It's based on your gauge and what you're knitting and how long your foot is. And all of the instructions sort of say, okay, what you want to do is knit this to 2.5 inches less than you want your sock to be. So it's a little bit, if you're someone who likes exact patterns and exact numbers, that may not be for you. But if you're someone who just kind of wants to knit something and make it fit your own foot, then it's definitely easily doable. And like I said, I tend to know that a medium-sized sock usually has 60 to 64 stitches, and then using the gauge in the pattern, or using the measurements in the pattern, it told me that like a size 7 to 9 foot generally has, I think it said, between a 9 and 10.5 inch foot length. And so I'm aiming for these to be between 9.5 and, I'm sorry, 9 and 10.5, and I'm aiming for these to be about 9.5 inches on the foot. So I'm making the middle of the middle, hoping that it will fit the model or whoever will end up wearing these socks. It won't be me, because I'll be returning these to Zen Yarn Garden. So these will be available soon. I don't think they're quite available yet, but they will be available soon. And again, that's a double-stranded sock blank, and these are the socks that I'm knitting. It's a free pattern from Knit Picks, and it will be linked in the show notes. So, excuse me, sip of tea, and then we'll move on. So that is all I have to show you for knitting progress this week. And that is because I worked on some other things while my husband was gone. The first thing that I did is I finished the hand spun that I had been working on for about a week and a half. And this is it. It is about 340 yards of a probably sport to DK weight, and it is Montana Corriedale. It did not have a colorway name, so I'll have to come up with something. It reminds me of flannel shirts, but it's teals and grays and a little bit of white, and this was a blend from Apothecary Fibers, and like I said, it's Corriedale, which is one of my favorite for socks, and this will be going up in my shop. It should be up by the time this podcast is up. I'm going to take photos as soon as I am done here, and then I will put it up in the shop. So if that interests you, it would make lovely socks. It would make lovely winter accessories. It's not rough. I wouldn't say you can't wear it next to skin. However, it's not what I would also say next to skin soft. You have to put it next to your skin. So it's just a little bit slightly longer stapled and just a little bit more rustic than some of the other blends. I shouldn't use the word rustic. That makes it sound like it's itchy. And to be honest, I don't think this would be itchy even against my skin. It's a nice sturdy blend for socks. I really like it. So that is the finished spin. The spin that I started was some Falkland, and it is from Kumasi, who now has her own website that will be linked in the show notes. And this is kind of an orangey. I always thought it was kind of a fiery orangey, but as I pulled it apart to spin it, and I don't know if my camera will pick up on these subtleties, it's got reds, and then also it's got some areas of like almost peachy orange and pink. And so I think actually what this is this really is kind of a dark coral. And it's gonna spin up very semi-solid. It's because that's exactly what the braid is. Like I said, it's reds and oranges and a little bit of pink, and it's really pretty, and you can definitely see some variation just in what I'm holding. Here I have the first 1.5 ounces or so on the wheel, and this is the second 2 ounces. So hopefully I will finish this week. If not, Tour de Fleece is coming up, and I'm sure I will be doing lots of spinning then. So that is the spinning. So the final thing that I wanted to talk about is actually the thing I probably spent the most time on this the last couple days while my husband was out of town, and that is that I worked on my quilt. So I did mention, for those of you who have been following along, back in March of this year, I joined the marketing team at Missouri Star Quilt Company, and they are headquartered here just outside of Kansas City. They're up in Cameron. They're about 85, 90 miles from my house, so I do not go into the office every day. Actually, I have not been in yet at all. I'm going to be going up this summer. I work from home, but I have been working for them, and it didn't take very long for me to be kind of officially working for them before I decided I might like to try my first quilt. And so I tend towards modern quilts, and I sort of kept an eye out for a pattern that I thought would be relatively easy. And I think I picked one that's okay. It is called the Kaleidoscope Quilt. It is designed by Missouri Star, and it can be made using 2 packages of layer cakes. And layer cakes are pre-cut squares of fabric, so they come already cut of a certain size, and layer cakes are 10-inch squares. And so I ordered one that was a set of beautiful batik fabrics, which are fabrics that are dyed kind of using resist dyes. They basically use, I think, wax to form the designs on the fabric, and then they dye the fabric with the wax in there, and then they clear the wax away, and what you have left is kind of the resist, which is the pattern on the fabric. And then I also chose a pack of white squares. And this was sort of based on a video tutorial that I had seen. Missouri Star Quilt Co. has great video tutorials if you're interested. And so I watched the video tutorial, and I thought the quilt looked fairly simple to put together. And basically what you're doing is you're taking all those 10-inch squares and you're cutting them up into pieces and rearranging them and putting them with other squares and sewing them back together. And so I thought it would be a relatively simple first quilt for myself because, like I said, it works with pre-cuts, which means there's a lot less cutting of fabric because it's already cut to smaller sizes that are at least a portion of which you're going to use. I still had to cut them down further, but I didn't have to start from a bolt of fabric and cut everything down to what I needed. And then the second piece is, even though I was cutting the squares apart and putting them back together, I don't actually have to match up any seams. So for instance, when you're quilting, if you have seams coming together at corners, like you want them to actually come together where all four corners are roughly equal and they kind of make 4 points that meet, whereas you don't want them to be a little off or a kilter. And so the deal is that when you make these squares, I'm gonna be rotating them as I place them in the quilt. And so there's never going to be a section where a whole bunch of seams need to meet up. So I thought that would make things easier. So I'm going to show you what I have. These are about half, I'm not going to show you all of them. These are about half the quilt blocks that I was making. So like I said, I started with 10-inch squares of the fabrics. And so you can see these are the resist dyeing. You can see it makes all kinds of fun patterns on there. And these are the batiks. And I got it kind of in a rainbow of colors. There are quite a few of these dark colors. There actually are patterns on the dark. I think you can see that there. And there's patterns here. This is like a purple flower one. And so what I did is I cut each 10-inch square into a variety of pieces. We had one that was like one long strip. We had one that was sort of cut in half so it could be 2 strips, and then we had one that was cut into 3 pieces so it could be 3 strips. They're not all equal, but that's not important. And then my job was to sew them back together. So the first thing I cut the single strips and left those alone, and then I cut the half strips of each of them, and then I sewed these units together on one of the days. This is what I did on Thursday night. And on Friday night what I did is I sewed these 3 bits together. That what I did? No, on Friday night I sewed 2 of these bits together, and then on Saturday I added whatever the third one was, and then on Sunday yesterday I started to sew these pieces together. No, I created these 3 on Friday, and then I sewed 2 together on Saturday, and then I added the third on Sunday. And the idea is just to mix these up so they're all different. So you can see I have a bunch of different ones. In all different, I guess I'm going to keep these sort of in order because I had them laid out on the floor. So you can see I've got all different colors and all different patterns. And I just tried to, so in terms of color arrangement, I tried not to get too precious with the color arrangement. I just tried to match a couple lights with a couple darks, and I tried to not always put the same fabrics together. Obviously, the white is the same in everything. I tried for a while not to match my 2 patterns, so I tried to get all different patterns, and that worked with most of them, but not all of them. And like I said, I really just tried to get a rainbow representation. There were a lot of darks in this batch, and if I had it to do again, I'd probably pick something that had a few more light fabrics, just because there are a lot of ones that have a lot of dark fabrics. So this is kind of what I've got. I've got 32 of these, which is only half, and I've got the other 32 that I need to finish. Technically, I need 63, but I decided to just go ahead and make 64 because cutting, it made more sense to just cut them all evenly. And then I'll pick one that I probably won't put in the quilt, and I might actually use as a label on the back of the quilt. So I'll just show you a couple more of these. Anyway, so these are what I worked on all weekend, sewing all these seams and pressing these and getting them ready so that I can then put them together. So there's some really fun fabrics. They're bright and colorful. This is going to be, like I said, there's a little bit more of the dark. I wish there had been a few less black and a few more in the yellow-green range, because I think that would have been a little bit more aesthetically pleasing to me, but I don't think it's going to be a problem when I put the whole quilt together. Now, I will say that in these, I am still learning to sew straight, because I do not sew so straight. It actually is really hard. I thought that I started with these 2 strips because I thought getting that short seam would be kind of the easiest way to go. And those I did okay on. And I got a little bit better on these, but then some of the longer seams I had a little bit of trouble again. So, oh, also, as I'm showing you these blocks are not trimmed. So you can see like here there's some extra white and here there's some extra blue. This is not, I did not mess up. The deal is that this is the full strip of so this is a 10-inch strip and I think it's 3 inches wide. And then you lose some of it when you sew your seams because what I have here are roughly 1/4 inch seams. And so some of the strips that have more seams in them have less fabric remaining because there's more fabric eaten up in the seams. So that's why these are of different lengths. Basically, I have ordered a square ruler, and actually you can see this one is not that square. I can see because these lines are not both. This one goes a little bit this way. So you can see my mistakes. But so I will be trimming these squares up so that they are perfectly square before I sew them together into the quilt. So these are what I have so far. I still have a bunch more. We like this block. I like the colors in this block. So, and I have a million favorite blocks and fun things, but that is what I have been doing. So that is my stack of 32 blocks. That is half my quilt. And what I did this past weekend, I have a few more blocks. I have 32 blocks where I have 2 sewn together, and I just need to add the 3rd piece. So I basically have 32 more long seams to go and press those. And then, like I said, what I will need to do is trim them all up and then lay them out in a format that looks pleasing to me. And then I will sew them together in rows across, and then I will flip the rows right sides together and sew those. So that is kind of a project in progress. I'm hoping that maybe I'll be able to finish my part of the sewing in the next couple weeks, and then I'm actually going to send it out to be quilted. I have, let's see, I can show you what I have for the backing and binding. So the binding is going to be this blue, so there's just going to be a thin strip of this blue around the edge of the quilt, and the backing is going to be this one. The whole quilt back is going to be this fabric. So what I did is I ordered extra fabric. The fabric came in, like I said, the layer cakes, but you can also purchase it by the yard. And so what I did is I purchased yardage for the backing and binding. And then Missouri Star actually has a long arm quilting service. And so I'm going to send my quilt in to be quilted. That's because this is going to be a big quilt. It's going to be about I think about 65 by 80, so it's going to be a decent size. I'm going to use it, it would actually fit on a bed if I wanted to. I'm probably just going to use it on the couch to cuddle under, but it's a big quilt, and I do not have a machine that will allow me to do that. Plus, for my first quilt, I decided I was not going to machine quilt it. I could hand quilt it, but honestly, I decided I want to just send it out and get it done. I do have a few smaller projects in mind so that I can learn to do some quilting. I found a really cool quilted pillow tutorial the other day, which, you know, would be very small, and I could do that on my home sewing machine. You can quilt quilts on your home sewing machine, but I would probably like to buy a slightly bigger sewing machine that has a little bit more room on the deck so that I can roll the quilt up and push it through the machine. And so I don't think I'm going to try this time. So that is all I have for you today. I hope that you are doing well, that you have had a lovely weekend, enjoyed some crafting time, and maybe even tried something new. This is all new for me, and I can't decide yet whether it's going to be something I really want to do. What I found is I don't enjoy the cutting. I don't sew so well, but I like that part. But I'm really not looking forward to having to trim up the blocks because I really didn't enjoy the cutting of the fabric to start either. So yeah, we'll have to see about that. Anyway, I hope that you are doing well. I hope you have a wonderful crafty week ahead. I will say, as I always do, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.